Welcome everybody to today's webinar on statelessness, on ending statelessness by 2024. My name is Agnes Swadai. I'm the chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Union IHL committee. I'm really happy to see such a strong participation on today's seminar because we are going to discuss a very, very important topic. Statelessness has been a major topic in IPU and of course in the IHL committee, and 2021 is going to be a decisive year as we have 3 years to go before the end of the I Belong campaign and the objective of putting an end to statelessness. We will need all efforts, and that's why I'm really glad to see such a strong parliamentarian participation to end statelessness and so much interest by other stakeholders in engaging parliaments to end statelessness. We are going to have opening remarks, and after the opening remarks we are going to have honourable members of parliament who had decisive role in ending statelessness in their own countries, and we will listen to some briefing from them. And after that we are going to open the floor for questions and of course answers, and this is going to conclude today's webinar, which is just the beginning point in discussing this very, very important issue and how to end statelessness. Now let me introduce Gillian Triggs, UNHCR's Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, for her opening remarks.
On behalf of all my colleagues at the United Nations Refugee Agency, I'm very pleased to be with the Inter-Parliamentary Union to host this webinar to discuss how parliamentarians can advocate for an end to statelessness. I'm recording this from Australia, and sadly I'm not able to be with you for the live event, but I know that Martin is, and I'm very grateful that he's available, and I look forward, of course, to hearing the discussion. At the UN Refugee Agency, we're especially pleased that we have such a strong partnership with the Inter-Parliamentary Union. And that is for a very simple reason, that parliamentarians are best placed to achieve the goal of ending statelessness by 2024. Our advocacy must be focused on outcomes, ensuring that everyone has citizenship. Elected parliamentarians in democratic governments have the power and the influence to ensure that laws are enacted or reformed to ensure birth registrations and access to citizenship and nationality for everyone. Despite the 1948 Declaration on Human Rights, which recognizes that everyone has a right to nationality, a principle adopted 70 or so years ago, untold and unknown millions of people do not have citizenship today, and they suffer daily indignities and rights violations as a result. The lack of nationality has grave consequences in terms of people's ability to enjoy other fundamental rights. As Hannah Arendt famously said, the right to a nationality is the right to have rights. And I think that's a very important observation, because statelessness leads in practice to the denial of many other rights. And rights that, of course, are very much on our minds at the moment is access to healthcare and vaccinations in this time of COVID. The UN Refugee Agency is mandated to monitor and to promote the protection of refugees and people displaced in their own country. And for 2019, we reported that about 80 million people are displaced in their own country or are refugees seeking protection across borders. But rather less well understood than our role with refugees and IDPs is that we're also mandated to seek an end to statelessness. And we've been asked by the General Assembly to support countries in identifying and protecting those who are stateless and to prevent and reduce statelessness itself. It's the prevention aspect of the mandate that is unique to our work on statelessness. We can't prevent refugees moving across borders in search of protection or the movement of peoples within their own country fleeing from persecution, violence, and discrimination. But we have been entrusted with a prevention mandate with regard to statelessness for a very important reason, and that is that it's totally preventable through the adoption of the right laws and policies. And that is why parliamentarians are so absolutely critical to the fight to end statelessness. It makes the IPU one of our most important partners. We've enjoyed a robust collaboration with the IPU on statelessness over the years, jointly producing 2 handbooks, one on nationality and statelessness and the other on good practices on nationality laws. We've also jointly convened a global meeting for parliamentarians on statelessness, a particularly successful one at the Parliament of South Africa in 2015. I'd also like to stress, if I may, how much my colleagues and I at UNHCR appreciate that statelessness is a key agenda item for the International Humanitarian Law Committee, chaired by the wonderful Agnes Vadai, who's been such a terrific supporter. We have regular exchanges that keep parliamentarians globally up to date, and so we ask for your support in a particularly targeted way. The engagement of parliamentarians on statelessness has never been more urgent for a very particular reason, and that is that under the I Belong campaign, we have only 4 more years to get to our target of ending statelessness by 2024. But also, of course, this year is the 60th anniversary of the 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness, and we want to honour that instrument by increasing the number of parties to it. Well, significant advances were made through the high-level segment on statelessness in October 2019 and on the Global Refugee Forum in December of that year. And we've received 270 fresh pledges for action from 79 states to keep the momentum going in this important target of ending statelessness. Many of the pledges involve law reform to bring nationality laws in line with the standards of these UN statelessness conventions. There are also many pledges to accede to the UN Statelessness Convention, which of course also involves the role of parliamentarians. The presentations to come will provide more details about these pledges, but for now, may I say on behalf of all my colleagues at UNHCR, how grateful we are to have such a strong partnership with the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Thank you for organising this event and for supporting advocacy to end statelessness. I look forward to hearing about the webinar, listening to the presentations, and I hope that it will be a useful teaching tool to encourage many others, both our colleagues and beyond, to support this important aim of ending statelessness. It's doable, statelessness is preventable, and we can reach that goal if we work together. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to being with you before too long. Thank you.
Honourable colleagues, I would like to thank Gillian for her intervention, and now let me pass the floor to dear friend, IPU Secretary General Martin Chungong. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Thank you for giving me the floor. Good to see you, and good to see so many people registered online and actually participating in this meeting today. I am very pleased and heartened by this strong interest and participation. And I think that we are all united in our conviction that together parliaments and parliamentarians can make a difference. And let me use the opportunity to thank profusely our long-standing partners and friends at UNHCR for their strong collaboration over the years, and I look forward to strengthening this cooperation. As I said, I think that we are all here because we know that there is no reason today for anyone to be deprived of or live without a nationality. For the majority of women and men, girls and boys in 2021, having a nationality is a given, an obvious fact of life, a right, and so it should be. Article 15 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to a nationality and that no one should be arbitrarily deprived of their nationality nor denied the right to change their nationality. Every individual everywhere in the world has the right to have a legal connection with the state. Every individual has the right to a sense of identity to the protection of a state and to the enjoyment of fundamental civil and political rights. And we all know that states have signed up to a multitude of international conventions and other legal instruments that govern the question of citizenship. And yet, today, there are millions of women and girls, women and men, girls and boys that have no nationality are therefore stateless. We heard that from Gillian in her introductory remarks. This means that millions of people today cannot live a life that you or I call normal, cannot enroll their children in school, own or lease property, work, marry, travel or vote, or even bury their dead. These men and women are not entitled to dream or project themselves into the future. How could they when their present is non-existent? They are invisible. Now there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that is the good news. We know that solutions exist and do work. They are in the hands of states. They are in the hands of decision makers. And that is why I believe that parliaments and their members have the moral responsibility to take action and step up to the challenge. After all, does it not stand to reason that they assume leadership given the legitimacy they wield as representatives of the people? We know that building a legal framework that prevents and prohibits statelessness is at the heart of sustainable and effective solutions. This means addressing discrimination in laws and in particular gender-based discrimination. Members of Parliament have a responsibility to shine the spotlight on this in their countries, review laws and amend them where necessary. And we have seen results. Women MPs, for instance, working across party lines and initiating bills to address key inequality issues, defending the rights of those that are often not heard or are forgotten. We also know that laws are only as good as the effort and resources put into them, with budget allocations aimed at supporting enforcement programs and structures. For members of Parliament, this entails regularly questioning the government on implementation and scrutinizing and adopting resources for impact. And here again, we have seen MPs holding their government to account and reallocating resources during budgetary debates to meet the needs of the most vulnerable and the voiceless. Lastly, for laws to be effective, they must be enforceable, widely known and understood. We know that statelessness is often difficult to understand, visualize, or monitor. Members of Parliament as opinion leaders can and should spread the word as representatives of the people. They engage with constituents on a regular basis, they listen and explain so that those that have no voice are represented as well. This is what the IPU believes in. It is an objective we have been striving to achieve over the years through our Committee on International Humanitarian Law, chaired by my good friend Agnes Vadai. We have worked to create awareness among MPs of humanitarian and human rights law, and more recently of statelessness. Information is crucial. It is the starting point for any action. Resolving statelessness will gain in strength through wider dissemination of the real issues at stake and challenging misconceptions. For parliaments to act, they also need to have tools and access to best practices. And that is why you heard Gillian refer to the tools that IPU and UNHCR have developed over the years. I encourage all of us to use these tools. And the webinar today is just another opportunity for us to raise awareness and share strategies and lessons learned. We have seen laws changed and amended, wrongs turned to rights, thanks to the will and engagement of one committed man or one committed woman. We can certainly do more, and the IPU will continue to support such engagement. And a little more than a year ago, the IPU submitted a series of pledges to the high-level segment on statelessness, committing to pursuing parliamentary awareness and building political will through parliaments. As Gillian said, 2021 is a crucial year. We're just a few years away from the target of 2024 to end statelessness. We are also marking the 60th anniversary of the Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness. It takes will and courage, but I believe that with strengthened parliamentary action, we can make the difference to end statelessness in the coming years. With those words, I wish to thank you and wish you very fruitful deliberations today. We're looking forward to the outcome of your proceedings. And as you said, Agnes, this is just the beginning. It's one in a series of efforts that we're going to be conducting in this very crucial area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me thank IPU Secretary General for his intervention. Thank you, Martin. It is great to see you. And now let me introduce a short video to you about Yekaterina, who shares in her own words reflections about her daily life and aspirations as a stateless person in the United States for almost 3 decades. Yekaterina is also a founding member of the NGO United Statelessness.
Hi, my name is Ekaterina, or as my mom calls me, Katya. I'm an artist, a volunteer, a daughter, a sister, and an auntie to an 8-year-old girl I've never met. I live in San Francisco. I'm also stateless. I have no nationality, no passport, and here in the US, no legal pathway to citizenship. It's early morning. Oh my gosh, I adore my housemate. Look at this, she made me a cup of coffee. Well, our day is about to begin. Here, she's picking me up, and we are going swimming.
Ready to swim? I am ready to swim. How about you?
So ready?
Let's go.
Swimming makes me feel truly free. Swimming in open water doesn't cost anything. As a stateless person, it's hard to feel like I belong anywhere. Swimming gives me a sense of belonging and freedom. I've been separated from my family for almost 30 years. But my mom and I keep in touch thanks to technology. We talk almost every day.
I'm so happy to see you.
I was born in the Soviet Union. I traveled to the United States at 16 on a Soviet passport, yet my country disappeared, and with it, my nationality. I love to paint. I try to paint daily. I dream of traveling the world someday and painting landscapes from all across the globe. Living without nationality is not easy. Can't legally work or get a driver's license. To get around, I usually walk or ride my bike. To protect myself, I don't show my face on camera. I try to remain hopeful and positive. If I ever do become a citizen, the first thing I do is make plans to travel back to see my family.
Oh, hi, darling. Hi.
I hope my story inspires you to learn more about
Let's
statelessness.
see if we can get like to the other end and then out. Let's stop this madness.
Honorable colleagues, if you see the real face of statelessness, if you see people like Yekaterina, then you understand that we really have to hard work to solve this problem. Now, let me introduce to you a very dedicated person regarding this fight, Melania Kanna, Chief of Statelessness Section at the UNHCR. Melania, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Agnes, for that introduction and for your partnership. I'm just delighted to be here today and to see that we have over 250 participants online. I'm very happy to be able to provide some basic information about statelessness and how parliamentarians can help address it so that we all start off on the same page. I'll also be providing some information about the pledges that Gillian referred to that were made at the high-level segment on statelessness, as they give us a very concrete platform for action indeed. If I could have my presentation up, I'd be ready to begin. Next slide, please. So first, what is statelessness? Statelessness is defined in the 1954 Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons, the very first article of which says that stateless person is a person who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. So essentially, a person who has no citizenship from any of the states that he or she may have ties to. For people who've never heard of statelessness before, this seems counterintuitive and surprising. How can anybody not have citizenship? Everybody has parents, everybody was born somewhere. I'll explain in a minute how it comes to be the case that millions of people on the planet are in fact without citizenship from any country. Being stateless is not the same as being a refugee or an internally displaced person. Refugees are people who have fled persecution and in doing so have crossed international boundaries. Internally displaced people are people who are forcibly displaced within their own countries. Most stateless people, by contrast, are not displaced and in fact are living where they were born and have lived their whole lives. Of course, some people who are stateless are displaced, and you may be familiar with the situation of the Rohingya in Bangladesh, which is the most prominent example of people who are both stateless and refugees at the same time. Statelessness is also not the same as being undocumented or being in an irregular migratory situation. Some people confuse these things and think that being in an irregular migratory situation or not having papers makes you stateless. But just to give a very concrete example, if I were to tomorrow travel without a visa to a country that requires me to have a visa to visit or work there, and I started working there illegally, and I burned my passport because I didn't want people to find out who I was or where I was from, I wouldn't be stateless because my state would still consider me its citizen, and I would probably be able to go back and reestablish my identity and reobtain my papers. On the other hand, for people who are in irregular migratory situations or who are without documents for a very long period of time, they do run the risk of eventually finding themselves stateless, as they may lose ties to their country of origin over time and not be able to reestablish documentation or proof of citizenship. And their children may be at risk if they don't obtain papers, particularly birth registration for children and proof of citizenship. Next slide, please. So what are the main causes of statelessness? How is it that people can wind up being stateless? Well, the first cause I'm going to talk about is discrimination in nationality laws. There are many countries today whose nationality laws still have explicit forms of discrimination written right into them. This can be discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, language, or religion, for example. And it's not surprising, once you know this, that more than 75% of the world's known stateless populations belong to a minority group. Again, you may be familiar with the situation of the Rohingya from Myanmar because they are the biggest known stateless population. In 1982, Myanmar reformed its nationality law to literally remove the Rohingya from a listing of ethnic groups that are eligible for nationality. Another cause of statelessness is gender discrimination. Today, 25 states globally still have nationality laws that don't allow mothers to confer nationality to their children on an equal basis as fathers. State succession, you just saw the video of Ekaterina, and indeed the situation of the former Soviet Union is a classic example of how state succession can leave people stateless. From one day to the next, a state ceases to exist, and the new state that takes its place may not recognize everyone on the territory who used to be citizens of the former state, as citizens of the new state. And then conflicts or gaps in nationality laws. This can arise particularly in situations of migration where two different nationality law systems run into each other. Most countries have nationality law systems that are based either on the principle of jus sanguinis or jus soli, so nationality by blood or nationality by birth on the territory. And some states have a combination of these two principles embedded in their nationality law. When people, for example, who come from a state that has citizenship by birth on the territory, migrate to a state that has citizenship by descent, and they have children there, they sometimes find that their state of origin, which goes by birth on the territory, doesn't automatically allow them to pass their nationality to their children. And the state where they've had the children, which has nationality by descent, doesn't automatically give citizenship to children born on the territory. So that kind of conflict can lead to statelessness, particularly where nationality laws don't contain the safeguards that prevent statelessness in situations like that are found in the 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness. Next slide, please. Some additional causes of statelessness include weak birth registration systems. Lack of universal access to birth registration puts children at risk of statelessness, particularly if they live in border areas or are members of minority groups. A birth certificate, of course, contains information about who your parents are and where you were born, which, as I just mentioned, are the two primary modes of acquisition of citizenship. And without the ability to prove those things, a child may have difficulty establishing his or her entitlement to nationality. Refugee situations, especially when multi-generational. As I mentioned, over time, people may lose ties to their home country and the ability to prove nationality. Children of refugees often also face obstacles when it comes to registering the birth of their children and obtaining nationality documentation from their home country. And finally, deprivation of nationality. Deprivation of nationality is on the rise as a trend in response to terrorism concerns. It can sometimes be used by states as a means of going after groups or political opponents that they don't like under the auspices or name of counterterrorism. As a general rule, the 1961 Convention prohibits deprivation where it would leave a person stateless. And even those countries that are not party to the 1961 Convention do have the obligation not to arbitrarily deprive people of nationality. Nonetheless, we do see a number of people becoming stateless every year as a result of deprivation of nationality. Next slide, please. What are the consequences of statelessness? Jillian and Martin already alluded to these. I put them all under the heading of leaving people behind so that they would immediately resonate with you as very consequential in terms of the international community's sustainable development aspirations and the overarching goal of not leaving anybody behind, because it's certainly the case that stateless people are often left behind as a result of lack of nationality. Obviously, lack of socioeconomic rights can be a very serious issue. Martin already mentioned education. We tend to see that students manage to find their way to primary school, sometimes to secondary school. They almost never are granted a diploma when they finish secondary school, however. So lack of certification from education or connected to education is a major issue. Legal employment, Ekaterina mentioned, public health care, we're of course very concerned right now that stateless people may wind up not able to access COVID-19 vaccines. The right to hold a bank account, rent or own property, lack of civil and political rights. Of course, if you're stateless, if you're not recognized as a citizen, you can't vote, and other forms of political participation are probably not open to you. Freedom of movement is a challenge, especially across borders. You may not be able to represent yourself in legal proceedings, and you may be subject to arbitrary detention. All of the above, of course, leave stateless people very vulnerable to extreme forms of exploitation and abuse, both labor-related and sexual forms of exploitation and abuse. And when you have whole communities that are subject to statelessness, again, especially from one generation to the next, of course, you have people who are living on the margins of society. And it's very clear, I think, that this is a development issue and not just a human rights one, because in addition to the individual consequences that people face as outlined above, statelessness among groups can be a cause of instability, conflict, and displacement. So it's a human rights issue, it's a development issue, it's also a peace and security issue. Next slide, please. So what are we doing about this at UNHCR? Jillian mentioned that UNHCR is the UN agency that has the mandate to address statelessness. And here we have the Global Action Plan to End Statelessness that we launched as a direct response to the mandate that's been entrusted to us by the General Assembly. All of these 10 actions are actions that UNHCR is encouraging the international community and especially states to take on an urgent basis in connection with the campaign we launched in 2014 to try to end statelessness in 10 years, so by 2024. And I won't read all of these things, but you'll see that these different actions ensure that no child is born stateless, prevent statelessness in cases of state succession, remove gender discrimination, and so on. They almost all go to the prevention or resolution of statelessness, because of course, if we're trying to end statelessness, we're trying to do those two things: prevent it from arising in the first place and resolve it where it already exists. And that is our focus. Next slide, please. So in connection with preventing and resolving statelessness, as Jillian mentioned, parliamentarians are absolutely key. And why is that? Because statelessness is fully preventable through changes in nationality law and good practices, including when it comes to birth registration. The key standards for both prevention and reduction are contained in the 2 UN statelessness conventions. The first one is the 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness, and when it comes to resolution, the 1954 Convention on the Protection of Stateless Persons. The 3 key safeguards that are in the 1961 Convention that help prevent statelessness from arising in the first place are spelled out here. The one contained in Article 1 of the 1961 Convention requires states parties to grant nationality to children born on the territory who would otherwise be stateless. It also requires states to grant nationality to children who were abandoned or found on the territory, whose parents cannot be identified, sometimes referred to as foundlings, and to children born abroad who would otherwise be stateless, where one parent is a national of the state party at the time of the birth. The convention also contains safeguards against statelessness later in life and adulthood. For example, as I already mentioned, related to deprivation of nationality, but also related to changes in personal status, prolonged residence abroad, and so on. If all states in the world simply applied all of the safeguards in the 1961 Convention, statelessness would in principle be wiped out within a single generation. And then when it comes to resolution, the 1954 Convention encourages facilitated naturalization for stateless people. Of course, resolving statelessness can be done by executive decree, in which case it would be the executive branch taking action. But when it comes to facilitated naturalization, that, of course, normally would require a specific provision in the nationality law that spells out facilitated naturalization for stateless people. So, for example, shortening the number of years that they need to be resident on the territory before they're eligible for citizenship, waiving language or other requirements. Next slide, please. Fortunately, we have some momentum on our side. Jillian mentioned that in 2019, we had a high-level segment on statelessness. We also had a global refugee forum. And at those two events, 270 new pledges were made to address statelessness by 79 states. And here are some examples. And here again, you see right away why parliaments are so key. Many of the pledges that we received relate to accessions to one or both of the UN statelessness conventions. And of course, parliamentarians have a role to play there, both with respect to the accession itself and the law reform that may be needed to bring the law into compliance with the standards in the conventions. So we see pledges to accede to the statelessness conventions, for example, from Cameroon and Mauritania. Pledges to facilitate naturalization for stateless persons, as I was just mentioning. One was made by Georgia. Pledges to remove discrimination from the nationality law. We saw Liberia make a pledge to work on removing the gender discrimination from its nationality law. Essentially, statelessness boils down to the presence of negative things in the nationality law, like discrimination, and the absence of good things, like the safeguards contained in the 61 Convention. So we need parliamentarians' help to tackle the negative things in nationality laws and ensure that the good things, the safeguards, are present in nationality laws. And we also need help in fulfilling the pledges that were made to accede to the statelessness conventions. Next slide, please. And just a few examples of recent good practice, parliamentary action to end statelessness. Malta, North Macedonia, and Iceland have all recently acceded to one or both of the statelessness conventions. Turkmenistan recently adopted a new law on civil status acts that will ensure that all children born on the territory have their births registered, irrespective of the status of their parents. Albania passed a new citizenship law that provides for an unrestricted safeguard to grant citizenship to all children born there who would otherwise be stateless. Ukraine adopted a new statelessness determination procedure. Those procedures identify stateless people and provide them with a protected status, pending a solution to their plight. Tajikistan passed an amnesty law providing a path to citizenship for foreign nationals following a shortened period of regularized status. And Uzbekistan passed a new law that will allow some 50,000 stateless people who've been resident on the territory for at least 15 years to acquire citizenship through a simplified naturalization procedure. And I think that brings us to the end. Next slide. So thank you very much for your attention. And just to say that UNHCR stands ready to assist states and parliamentarians in addressing statelessness. And we do have lots of resources available to support that. If you'd like to learn more or find some of those resources online, I encourage you to look at #IBelong or www.ibelong.org. Thank you very much. And back over to you, Agnes.
Thank you very much, Melanie, for these very, very valuable pieces of information. Let me introduce Ms. Senida Messi, Chair of the Subcommittee on Sustainable Development from the Parliament of Albania. and make it very clear that in July 2020, the Parliament of Albania approved the new citizenship law, which contains a number of positive provisions, especially for children at risk of statelessness. I would like to have two questions to you concerning this law and concerning the question of how to solve statelessness. Can you first briefly explain to us, and of course to all the participants, the provisions of the new law and its impact, and how was the gap in Albania's nationality laws identified, and what steps did the parliamentarians take to introduce the complete safeguard? And secondly, are there any lessons learned from the reforms in Albania in 2018 and 2020 that can be shared with us? What would you tell to other fellow MPs who want to engage in such reforms preventing statelessness? The floor is yours, Ms. Mazzi.
Thank you, dear Agnes, and thank you, IPU, for the invitation. And it's a pleasure for me to represent Albanian Parliament and to share with all the participants and colleagues from IPU our experience as well. Let me thank first IPU and SG, Mr. Chongung and his team for the excellent work that they are doing, not simply to get us as parliamentarians in all over the world together, but discussing such an important issues and somehow making awareness or increasing awareness to such an important issues, and all together trying to facilitate, work together, make a better work, make better laws for sure, and work together to achieve even sustainable development goals. As you already mentioned, in October 2018, the Parliament of Albania adopted legal amendments to the country's civil status law, removing barriers to birth registration. This, let's say, was the first amendment that we did, and particularly giving the right to parents to register their children, especially to the Albanian parents living outside the country, and children born from Roma and Egyptian communities. The amendments follow the baseline study done by UNHCR and its partner Legal Aid Society in Albania. We have a group in Albanian Parliament, which is a voluntary group led by the Speaker of the Parliament, which is called Children Parliamentary Group, which there we discuss issues about children, starting from their civil rights, children's rights, and till their nationality. And in June 2020, the Parliament of Albania approved the new citizenship law, which contains a number of positive prevention and goes in the same line with the rules and regulations of 1945 Convention relating to the status of stateless persons. Just for general information for you and for the members and MPs that are listening to us, acquisition of citizenship in Albania starts, yes, by birth. A child requires Albanian citizenship in cases when both parents are Albanians or at least one parent is Albanian. And it's born in the territory of Albania. The law is stipulating that even if the child is born outside Albania, but at least one parent is Albania, and the others maybe it's unknown or has unknown citizenship, or has another citizenship, but both parents agree that this child need or can have Albanian citizenship, then the law is permitting this newborn child to be registered in Albanian or with Albanian nationality. Meanwhile, with the adoption of the new law, which somehow went in the same direction with the existing law, but a little bit improved, we stipulated that a child born or found within the territory of Republic of Albania who could remain stateless can acquire Albanian citizenship. In case the child's parents became legally known before the child is 14 years old and have other nationality except Albanian, they might request the removal of Albanian citizenship for the child, but with a condition: as long as the child does not remain stateless as a result of this action. So Albanian citizenship by birth is also acquired by children born or found within the territory of the Republic of Albania when they are born to unknown parents in order to avoid statelessness. So this article in the law of citizenship, is allowing to all children that are born or find in a territory of Albania with unknown parents, to give them the chance to have exactly a nationality, in order that the state that found this child provide at least the basic, as already was mentioned even by the Secretary General and by other panelists, to give them the minimum right, which is not simply a registration, is not simply a nationality. And definitely for us, it's kind of, for the majority of people, it's something taken for granted, but for the few of them in the world, it's something that they are fighting for to receive this. In regard with your question, dear, about where the parliament is standing and what the parliamentarians should do in order to really give not simply voice, but even to mainstream a little bit more. In Albania, the issue was mostly for Roman and Egyptian people, and some, let's say, criteria or restrictions and delays in the registration of newborn children. And to the Albanians that were living abroad, they had a lot of procedures to pass through in order to register the newborn child as Albanian citizenship, even though the parents were citizens. First, it's, let's say, recognizing that there is a problem here and nobody should be without a nationality. Secondly, revise the law and to adapt and to change the law to better and increase as much as we can the procedures. With the digital world, we can, let's say, communicate much more easy, especially when Albanian parents are giving birth to a child, but in another country. And in Albania, it is allowed dual citizenship. So in this sense, yes, they can apply for a citizenship for their newborn child. And to say the truth, we have been having a really nice experience with two international organizations. One is UNHCR and the other is even UNICEF. Together with two international organizations, we have been consulting the amendments on the law, even with the European delegation in Albania. As you know, that Albania is in a process of European integration. So we have some commitments, let's say like this, with the Stabilization Association Agreement that we formalized. So we have some EU obligations, and we need to fulfill, even though we are not a member yet. We start revising our laws in order to be in line with acquis of European Union. So in this sense, we need to approve the laws and to adapt them into the new problems, and to be the same as member countries are doing within the European Union. Secondly, as you know, the parliament has not only the role to approve laws, but definitely even to control their implementation. And here is a part that we as a parliamentarians should do much more. We have nice laws, we have excellent laws probably, but somehow, for some reason, we have lacking of implementations. So the Parliament of Albania, but all members of MP, should be committed to really revise, review, and control the institutions, in this case, that are obliged to execute the citizenship law. How they are implementing the law? Is there any problem with the law? Does the law need any change to be much more easily implemented? And do we have still citizens without a state, especially children that needs to have the citizenship according to the law? And definitely the Albanian parliament has this priority and is committed itself to the protection of stateless people, but not only to human rights and to children's rights.
Thank you very much, Ms. Massi. It was really good to hear what kind of efforts the Parliament of Albania has been doing, and we hope these efforts will continue. We are going to continue with Honorable Gilang, member of the Indonesian House of Representatives, and if he is here with us, and I will have two questions. In 2006, the government of Indonesia adopted several proactive measures to reduce and prevent statelessness and to remove ethnic and gender discrimination. It also introduced safeguards against statelessness for Indonesian migrants abroad. My first question to the honorable representative would be, for many countries there still have discriminatory policies in nationality laws. Can you explain to us the non-discrimination in nationality laws and the importance of non-discrimination in nationality laws and the impact of the 2006 reform that you had in your country? How can parliamentarians lead such reforms? Secondly, as part of its high-level segment and statelessness pledges, the government of the Republic of Indonesia committed to work with all countries, particularly in light of these two statelessness conventions, to learn together, to increase capacities and exchange technology in addressing statelessness. How can the Indonesian House of Representatives help ensure the follow-up to the pledges made and contribute to the fight against statelessness? Honorable Gilang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Agnes, for the floor. Honorable panelists, honorable member of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to participate in this seminar on parliamentary action to end statelessness by 2024. Before I proceed, can allow me to introduce myself. My name is Gilang Flores, member of Indonesia House of Commission 3 on Law, Human Rights, and Security. For the question number 1, non-discrimination is an integral part of the principle of equality. It ensures that no one is denied the right, including right to citizenship. For Indonesia, since the reform in 1998, we continue to make improvement in our political and law system toward democracy that respect human rights, including improvement in the law on citizenship. While not a party in the 1954 Convention relating to the status of statelessness person or the 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness, Indonesia has implemented policy which adopted measures from the convention. And this is the law number 12, 2006 on citizenship. The law, which is passed in 2006, was drafted in the spirit to accommodate the plurality and diversity in Indonesia and to avoid discrimination, which at the time is a part of nation reform agenda. All regulations deemed discrimination in the previous law were then removed. As a replacement, the law 12/2006 on citizenship adheres not only to general principle of citizenship, but also to specific principles, among others. The principle of maximum protection, the principle of non-discrimination, the principle of recognition, and the respect for human rights. It also provides a better legal certainty, especially for children citizen status. In this law is also to aim to reduce statelessness because it recognizes the citizenship of every child born from mixed marriage between an Indonesian native and foreign national. And for every child born in Indonesian territory, even though the citizenship status of the parent is unclear, is considered as an Indonesian citizen. Furthermore, for a child born from mixed marriage, it is permitted to obtain dual citizenship as long as the child has not reached age 18 and yet not married. And this is also the part of the effort to reduce statelessness as stated in the Convention of the Children, which is Indonesia is a state party. In line with the issue of citizenship, Indonesia has now implemented a universal civil registry. This is in line with the human rights principle and in accordance with Indonesia's commitment in a high level of statement of statelessness to increase to increase the utilization of a digital platform for citizenship, registry, and citizenship documentation, such as the issuance of birth certificate and single identity number. Parliamentarians have a critical role to contribute the effort of reducing statelessness. At the foremost, parliamentarians should utilize their authority and influence in addressing the issue that drives someone to become stateless, such as discrimination, lack of birth certificate, conflict of nationality, law, and change to national border. In this regard, it is very important for parliamentarians to be able to set aside their political differences and work together in a non-help participation manner. This constructive attitude, in our view, is necessary if we are to help strengthen a more effective regime to reduce statelessness that can also encompass all people from different backgrounds. Parliamentarians can also play a vital role in achievement law reform to prevent, reduce, and ultimately end statelessness. And also, it is very important for parliamentarians to establish cooperation and communication with all interested parties, including academic, NGO, civil society, constituent, general public, to raise awareness on the importance to reduce statelessness. Raising awareness is very important to provide a public support in the drafting or revision of the law can be better and to be accommodated of the issue of statelessness reduction. Thank you. And next one, the question. Traditionally, parliamentary has three functions other than representative. The first one is drafting the law. The second is to determining the state budget. And the last one is to supervision the government tasks in all fields. In exercising its function on supervision, the Indonesian House has the right to ask the state official, government official, legal entity, or member of the public to provide information on matters that need to be handled in the interest of the nation and the state. The House is also entitled with the right to ask the government regarding the policy made by the government. Through optimizing the function of supervision, the Indonesian House will able to monitoring the continuing of pledge made by the government in the high-level segment of statelessness, as well as to carry out the check and balance to the program and the policy of the government. In the contribution to the fight against the statelessness, the Indonesian House of Representatives through parliamentary diplomacy remain consistent in the striving for the reducing of the statelessness. In the various forum and also in many opportunities, one of them is by encouraging the voluntary, safe, and repatriation of the Rohingya refugee to location of their choices. Indonesia House of Delegation has also managed to seek clarification from the parliamentarian of Myanmar to the General Assembly in 2018 and Assembly International Humanitarian Law at the meeting of IPU 139 in Geneva on the progress that has been achieved by Myanmar to bring about peace and remove all kind of oppression against the Rohingya, including refuse the law which render them stateless. I think that's all from me. Let me back to Dr. Agnes. Thank you. The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilang. I was really moved by what you said about the role of parliaments and that the main I think obligation of members of parliaments is to put aside their political differences and come together for a good cause, come together to reduce statelessness. And I think this is how we can solve this problem, and that our campaign together with UNHCR, the I Belong campaign, can be successful. So let me congratulate you for this very, very important idea. And I think all parliaments, all politicians should continue in that way. So yes, we have political debates, we will always have, but there are very important universal issues, universal topics where we should come together, put aside our political differences, and find together in one line. So thank you, Mr. Guillain, for your words. And now let me turn to Ms. Ainara Feno, who's the Member of Parliament of Madagascar, and let me have two questions to her. Process towards reforms of nationality laws in Madagascar was initiated in 2019 and is now pending government review. Can you describe the aims of the pending bill and how it strengthens protection against child statelessness, which is a very important issue for us? Can you speak a little bit also about the ongoing process of building support for the bill? And secondly, in 2016, advocacy and awareness raising activities were ongoing in Madagascar around a draft bill to remove gender discrimination from the nationality law, which was achieved in May of 2017. How did parliamentarians lead this legislative reform, and what can parliaments around the world learn from the lesson of Madagascar when it comes to achieving gender equality in nationality laws? Ms. Rafana, the floor is yours.
Merci je vous remercie de l'invitation.
Sure, for giving me the floor. Dear panelists, honourable parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, indeed, in 2019 there was a draft bill to reform systems on nationality was issued by the Senate, but this was not carried out in full. In 2020, we relaunched the process through the same institution, this time with the contribution of the Ministry of Justice and the support of all other stakeholders, such as the UNHCR, the Focus Development Association, and all other committees that work on statelessness. Indeed, this bill in 2019 was adopted by the Senate on the 1st of July 2020. This bill allows the women in Madagascar to automatically transfer their nationality to their children independently of their marital status. This allowed Madagascar to get out of the list of the 27 countries that do not allow women to automatically transfer their nationality. The adoption or an application of this law allowed us to eliminate many cases of statelessness, including with children, without fully eradicating the phenomenon itself. To give you an example, this new law prevented 2,700 women of mixed race to acquire their mother's nationality, and hundreds of nationalities per year were given out by the courts. There is also a national plan on the reduction and elimination of statelessness in Madagascar, and this came to light in September 2019. Managers, technicians, and now various ministries and institutions, together with the National Assembly, participated in the drafting of this. Now, in 2021, the National Assembly is picking up the pace and has decided that the legislation on nationality will be reformed. Now, why is this? There was a parliamentary workshop with all political leanings brought together in December 2020, together with the support of the stakeholders, as I mentioned before. Now, this remodeling involves, while keeping what was brought in by the law of 2016 and the modifications of the Senate, it involved complying with the international legal instruments on human rights as was ratified by Madagascar, and thus to end the issues surrounding nationality. The aim was also to prevent any obstacle to acquiring our nationality by our citizens. There will be another workshop on the 28th of February next, still with the same stakeholders, in order to cement this remodelizing and bring together a new law on our citizenship. This new proposal will thus be transferred to the government in April for observation and will then be submitted to be reviewed by Parliament during the next session, which will be in May. To answer the second question, yes, reforms brought about by the law of 2016 does constitute a significant progress in terms of respecting and promoting human rights. As I have said, several workshops have been carried out in order to raise awareness amongst both parliamentarians as well as citizens. As we are aware of the discrimination in our national legislation, and also following the regular examples of these issues, such the committee, therefore we have used various events that happened in the past and to take responsibility, for parliamentarians to take responsibility, which ended up in the adoption of the 2016 law. Now, what lessons can be learned from this? The right to nationality is a fundamental human right, and this is the right to have a right. This is before even other fundamental rights, and thus the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in its Article 15 says that any individual has the right to a nationality without any discrimination, including gender-based discrimination. Finally, I would just give two recommendations. Firstly, ratify the international conventions or the regional conventions, and then assure that legislation on nationality complies with said conventions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much.
Just to ratify the conventions and do everything to end statelessness. Sometimes it seems that easy, but maybe sometimes we politicians make it a little bit more complicated. I would like to thank you and congratulate you and your parliament for the process. It's very, very important what you have been telling to us. And before we end our webinar today, I would like to have a question to our participants, because many questions have arrived so far. Some are answered in writing, others will be answered. All questions will be dealt with somehow. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but there is one question, and I would like to ask the participants to reflect on that very briefly. The question of climate change. That was asked by many. One is Claudia Rowe, Deputy President of the German Parliament. She was, of course, referring to the climate change and how climate change is affecting the protection of stateless people, and what we can do and what kind of efforts do we have to take to combat statelessness in connection with climate change, and what steps can countries take to minimize the risk of increased statelessness in the context of climate change. So if any of the panelists would like to answer to that, I will be very happy to give the floor to. Melanie, maybe?
I can perhaps say a few words about that, Agnes. Thank you so much for the good question. It's an excellent question. We know that forced displacement increases the risks of statelessness, and we know that climate change is going to increase forced displacement. So I would say that climate change just makes the very succinct recommendations that the member from Madagascar made all the more urgent. We need states to adhere to the statelessness conventions and implement their standards, because those will help prevent an increase in statelessness that will otherwise be associated with increased forced displacement as a result of climate change.
Thank you very much. I think it was very, very important what you said, Melanie, and also let me thank you again for the wonderful introduction. During this webinar, we have been dealing with, of course, gender discriminatory provisions, with the question of child statelessness, of course, with ethnic discriminatory provisions. So these are all important parts and I think segments of ending statelessness. We have heard about very, very good practices, and it was mentioned by Gillian and Martin as well that IPU has been doing a lot of work in order to collect all the good practices. I think we should continue on that, and then with the questions we heard today, and of course with the steps and actions that were taken by the member states, we should increase the volume of these booklets to give a hand to members of parliament. We are going to, of course, as I mentioned, publish these speeches, and the recording is going to be available. It's already written where it's going to be available, so every participant today will be able to listen again to the pledges that were made. We're able to listen to all the good practices, and what is more important besides pledges is the concrete steps that were taken. I think that's very, very important. So if no one else would like to yeah, I see our colleague from Albania. Can you come in for a last long sentence?
As I already stated, that it's not that our job should finish with improving a law or amending an existing one or approving a new law. Our job needs to further develop. We need to further discuss with each other. You mentioned before the climate changes, and I'm a strong believer that when we are talking about climate changes, and about even other issues like anti-terrorism and security in the region, these things have no borders. So these things has not really typically a state. So this somehow improves or forces all us together to work together with border states, like in Albania with Western Balkan countries, Western Balkan countries with other European countries, but not only, or like African countries, Southeast European countries, North, South America. So my point is that we need to work a little bit much more regionally than simply nationality, in only our, let's say, borders as one state. And this could be, let's say, my main remarks. I'm not saying my personal commitment, because this is not a personal commitment. It requires a little bit much more political will from all the political parties, not only one country, in order to look these issues a little bit beyond the respective country and to work together for the betterness of our people and citizens in all the world.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saninda, and good luck for your accession to the European Union. I can't wait to have you. Mr. Gilang, one long sentence about the lesson learned today and your message, please. We cannot hear you. Can you put your microphone on, please?
Oh, yes. Can you repeat the question again?
So can we have your lesson learned and your message sent to the participants in one long sentence, please?
Okay. So I believe the Indonesian House will be observed and thought about the government regarding to the stateless. And while related to the issue, well, some other try to end or to share obligation regardless to the refugee asylum seeker. As we can see, I'd like to talk about what step can country take minimalist to reach statelessness. In Indonesia, I believe some human rights activists who try to give legal assistance to refugee will receive some insufficient legal protection, as will not fully specify profit in the regulation. So I believe under international law ratification and the handling of refugee are carried out, we Indonesia will be able to make some guidelines which do not distinguish between refugee and asylum seeker. The refugee live in a shelter and are subject to mandatory monthly report, while children and vulnerable family members stay outside the shelter. So I guess that's all from me, Dr. Agnes. Thank you for your attention. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilang. And finally, Ms. Rafeno, your message to the participants.
Oui, vous pouvez, s'il vous plaît, répéter la question parce que j'ai...
Okay, so what would be the message of, or what would be your message to the participants about today's webinar and of course about the topic?
Oui, merci. Alors, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure,
So as I said earlier, so I'm just basically repeating on my recommendations. As of course, we are part of the countries that ratified here the conventions on statelessness. So let me repeat that for the countries which have not yet ratified these international conventions or regional conventions, I would strongly encourage them to do so. And also I'd like to encourage all countries to move forward step by step to eliminate statelessness. Therefore, I strongly encourage parliaments and all the MPs to continue to raise awareness at government level, but also to continue all these inter-parliamentary discussions and continue also raising awareness with the population so we can therefore eliminate statelessness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. To conclude our webinar today, first let me thank Gillian Triggs and of course Martin Chungong, my dear friend, for their opening remarks, Ms. Melanie Khanna for her extraordinary introduction on the topic, and of course my fellow parliamentarians, I can say, because we are all colleagues, regardless where we are sitting right now. Mr. Gilang, Ms. Massi and Ms. Rafeno, and of course I would like to thank the Honourable Speaker for trying to come in. Hopefully next time we will be able to listen to his results. It will be very, very important. Well, colleagues, dear participants, we have a little bit more than 3 years to go. Yeah, until this I Belong campaign finishes. We would be very happy to see much more results from the countries. We have heard a lot of pledges in recent years. IPU and UNHCR have been working strongly together to promote this campaign and to do everything, as it was said, to have an inter-parliamentary cross-country solution and cross-country division of ideas, information and thoughts. IPU has been a strong and dedicated advocate of ending statelessness, and the IPU Secretary General has an eminent role in that with his dedication to this topic. My colleagues in the IHL committee are also very keen on working on this issue. As you have heard, the IPU, together with UNHCR, issued 2 little books on good practices and on information. That is a help and the hand to the members of parliament. And today's good practices and all the information that was showed are also giving a lot of information, a lot of help to the members of parliament. Let me finish here by saying thank you to IPU, to UNHCR, and of course for the technical help to PHAP, and of course to all the participants, the panelists, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for being here and spending time with us, and of course to everybody who was participating today. We know there have been a lot of questions. Actually, I was listening and reading at the same time some of the questions, and some very good ideas came from these questions. We are going to answer all of them, collect them, and study from these questions. And as Martin, IPU Secretary Martin Chungong said, this is the beginning. Yeah, we agree. We're going to continue this cooperation with UNHCR. So, honorable colleagues, thank you very much again. It was a pleasure and a great honor to be here with you together this afternoon. And hopefully soon we can have more results and we can see much more good practices. Thank you very much and have a very nice day and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.